All right, welcome to our college prep virtual session. My name is Denise Cunningham, and I am your host today. And you are here to hear Dr. Les Parrott talk about supporting your student through the college search process and beyond. So this virtual session is part of the Virtual Christian College Fair sponsored by NACAP and Find Your Christian College. The virtual fair platform is open 24 hours, 7 days a week from now until the end of November. You can explore anytime you like, and be sure to join us on Thursday, November 17th from 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern, as college reps will be in their booths waiting to talk and interact with you. In addition, we will have our final live college prep webinar called Test Optional, Is It Really an Option? On Thursday, November 17th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Just look in your email for more information about those dates. And now I would like to introduce our presenter, Dr. Les Parrott. He is a psychologist and #1 New York Times bestselling author. He and his wife, Dr. Leslie Parrott, are co-founders of the SYMBIS assessment, which is used by thousands of counselors, clergy, and coaches around the world. Dr. Parrott's books have sold over 4 million copies in more than 24 languages and include the award-winning Saving Your Marriage Before It Starts, as well as their latest book, Healthy Me, Healthy Us. Drs. Parrott are also founders of the acclaimed YADA assessment for high school and college students and single adults, which you will hear more about during this session. Dr. Parrott has been featured in USA Today, The Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times, and appeared on numerous television programs, including CNN, Fox News, Good Morning America, CBS This Morning, The Today Show, The View, and Oprah. Dr. Parrott lives in Seattle with his wife and teaches in the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences at Northwest University in Seattle, which is also a Christian university. So we're really excited to have Dr. Parrott share his expertise and wisdom with us. And without further ado, Dr. Parrott.
Hey, this is Dr. Les Parrott, and thanks for joining me for this session on supporting your student through the application process, the search process, and beyond when it comes to college. And I got to tell you, my wife Leslie and I can identify. We're going through this very same thing with our youngest son right now, and we have an older son who just graduated from college and it's into grad school. So welcome. And I'm going to be short and sweet. I'm going to go right to the point. How do you succeed with your student that you have poured so much into all of your life, all of their life? How do you succeed at this important juncture when there might be discrepancies and personality styles that are making it maybe even conflictual? How do you do that? Well, if I could sum it up in a single word, which is always tough to do, it would be this: empathy. The capacity to put yourself in that student's shoes and see the world through their eyes. And that sometimes is counterintuitive to really what we want to do, because as parents, we know best, right? We want to say, I know you, and here's what you need to do. I got a wonderful plan for your life. And that can work for certain personalities, but not very many. But when you come alongside your student and you say, I want to understand you a little bit better, and what are your goals, and what are you trying to achieve, and what's your dream, and you get into their skin, imagine what life must be like to be walking around in their shoes, life gets a whole lot easier. And in fact, what happens, and I'm speaking as a psychologist, a counterintuitive thing begins to happen, and suddenly your son or your daughter's going, well, what do you think, Mom? What do you think, Dad? You know, because they feel understood. They feel known. That's the power of empathy. Now, let me tell you something quickly about empathy, and then I'm going to give you a super practical tool that you can use in walking through this process that makes it so much easier. But let me tell you a little bit about empathy. We've done a lot of research on it, a lot of study on this, written books on it. And here's what I can tell you from several studies. Most of us think we empathize better than we really do. So if you're listening to this here in the first 5 minutes, you go, yep, check that box, I got that, got a lock on empathy. Think again, because most of us are really challenged by this. We sometimes confuse empathy with sympathy, of course. I sometimes tell my counseling students at the university that sympathy is standing on the shore and throwing out a life ring to somebody that's struggling in the water. And every decent human being would do that. Every good parent would do that. Empathy takes it a step further. It doesn't just throw the life ring to somebody that's struggling in the water. Empathy is diving into that water and risking your own well-being to bring that person back to shore. And not everybody does that. In fact, that's so rare. What do we call those people? Heroes, right? I think it's just as heroic when a parent does that for their student, because it just goes against the grain. It's not an intuitive kind of natural thing for us to do as human beings. It's a very conscientious kind of endeavor. And it involves both your head and your heart. This is another key factor, okay? Most of us think that we're better at empathy than we really are. That's number one. And number two is you've got to understand truly what empathy is. It involves both your head and your heart. Like I said, sympathy, that throwing out the life ring, that's all heart. That flows with adrenaline. That's just because it's just natural. Sympathy is easy, okay? Empathy involves your heart and your head. It's like two wings of an airplane. You want to get empathy off the ground, you've got to use both your sympathetic capacity and your analytic capacity to recognize and accurately see the world as this other person, in this case, your student. And when you do that, it's an incredible gift. It's the way, it's the pathway, it's the on-ramp to being known as a human being. And when you achieve that with your student, it's amazing how much easier the application process goes, the discernment process goes, and guiding them through the critical steps of this life phase. And by the way, this is a critical juncture. The decisions that they make during this period of time tend to shape their trajectory in life more than nearly anything else that they will decide. Of course, selecting a mate eventually, their spiritual grounding, other things that are important, but boy is this, and it's difficult to over-exaggerate how important this is. It is so valuable. Now, what do we do? If empathy is the key to doing this, what do we do to make that empathy practical? How do you put flesh on it, right? How do you make it real in the life of your student and you in this relationship? Well, like I said, we've done a lot of research, a lot of studying on this, and we have developed a tool that is incredibly valuable in this process. Maybe you've heard of it and you've seen it here in the context of this whole series, but it's called YADA, Y-A-D-A. All right, now you're going, what's YADA? Yada is a Hebrew word. It's used more than 1,000 times, or almost 1,000 times in Scripture, and it means to know, all right? But it's a profound sense of knowing. It's knowing with your head and your heart, okay? It's usually used within the context of knowing God, of course, in Scripture, but it also is applicable to us in our relationships, in our families and friendships and beyond. And so you've heard the word yada. You've probably heard yada, 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 that Yiddish. That's you know, you know, you know. And in the context of this yada, it's to know yourself, which is one of the hallmarks of emotional well-being and health, emotional, psychological health, all right? Self-awareness, right? And then secondly, to know yourself, and that's the first, and then to know others, all right? That means being able to lean into somebody else's life, which is the whole process that we're going to talk about here. And then third is to be known, all right? So to know yourself, to know others, and to be known by others. Yada, yada, yada. Now, you're probably wondering, okay, so what is this thing? Well, it's very simple. You go online, you answer a few questions, takes about 10 minutes, and it generates this little 10-page report that gives you all kinds of information about your personality and so on. And I'll walk you through a few highlights on this, but that's the process. Now, I got to let you know at the outset, this is not designed for you. This is designed for your student. We've had many adults, thousands and thousands of adults that take YADA, but I just want you to be aware, this is really for your student to do this. But here's what I'm recommending. Because this is such an important juncture in their lives and in your relationship and the context of it, to know and be known and so forth, I recommend both of you do this, that you take this as mom and dad individually, and that your student take this as well. And you got to be really careful in how you frame this to your student, because if they feel like, what, we're going to do a curriculum together or whatever, it's just going to be a complete turnoff. So you got to contextualize this. And the best way I've seen this done with parents is to say, hey, we want you to succeed in this whole college application process and your life at college. And so we've looked around for tools that can make that effective. And we've discovered one that might be worth checking out. Let's see, if you're open to it, kind of a little experiment just to see how it goes. What do you think? It's this thing called YADA, and you can explain what that is, and ask them to make the decision with you. If you come down like a heavy hammer and just say, hey, we're going to do this thing together because I want to help you in college, forget it. Their heart's not going to be in it. So make sure it's an invitation to explore this together, and it's very clear that you don't have some kind of hidden agenda. It's simply to see whether or not this tool might help you in the process. Okay, so once you kind of get to that stage and everybody's willing to jump in and try it out, what you'll see in this little report is the first page that talks about personality. And personality, this is called the pinwheel of personality right there. And it'll locate your student. This is a real life student, by the way, in Seattle where we live, that gave us permission to share her results, a college student. And what you will see is that you'll fall into one of 8 kind of categories, personality types. Why is this important to understand? Well, remember, it's all about empathy. And if you can understand how your student is hardwired, how God made them, the DNA of their personality, because this is God-given. You don't just decide on your personality. You come pre-packaged with DNA that reveals your personality, whether you're fast-paced or slow-paced, whether you are task-oriented or people-oriented, right? Whether you are an introvert or an extrovert. All that, you can kind of shape it a little bit, and sometimes a crisis in your life can move you off of that kind of place that you were born into. But generally speaking, our personalities are relatively permanent. Now, that means we can have the best version of our personality and the worst version and somewhere in between. So there's that kind of change, but the basic DNA. And so that's what this will do, is kind of help you understand their personality hardwiring and yours as well. Why is this important? Because vulnerability begets vulnerability. Let me say that again. In this whole process, this is a critical piece of information to understand as a parent. Vulnerability begets vulnerability. In other words, if you're doing this along with your student, they're far more likely to talk with you about their results because they hear you talking about yours. Now, word of caution as a parent. The point is not to dominate the conversations around this kind of thing with information about you. Let them ask questions. And yeah, I always thought that you were kind of more, this way. And some of these, by the way, are like the achieving spouse or the cooperating spouse, or not spouse, person. We have another version of this for married couples. But this whole thing, analyzing. This is the person, by the way, the analyzing person. This is the person that is task-oriented and slow-paced. So guess what? If your student ends up there, they're going to really take their time. They're going to read through all the brochures. They're going to go online. They're probably making a matrix of all the different schools that they can apply to. That's very different than the student that's down here that is the affirming person, that is fast-paced and people-oriented. This is the student that's just going, I just got a feeling about this school. I like it. I like the pictures here, and I can't explain it, but I just know I'm jazzed, man. I really want it. And they're going to have a lot of emotion around the process. Very different than the analyzer, okay? And then you have, unwavering. I'm not going to take the time to go through all these. You'll get it. 2 paragraphs come with this, and I want you to understand why this is valuable. Because these 2 paragraphs have nearly 40,000 variables in each of them. That means you'll never see this paragraph on anybody else's report. Even if, let's say you and your student are both coming off as pioneering people. Well, if that's the case, you'll have a lot in common with your student, but you will not have the same paragraphs because we fine slice it. We thin slice it. We're gonna make sure it's very customized to you and to them. So that's the beginning place. This is the best kind of on-ramp, like I say, to empathy, to really seeing the world as they see it, which, as a reminder, you might have already lost a point here. Let me underscore it. The point is they can relax with mom and dad because mom and dad understand them, right? They are known by them. And when they're known and understood, they're far more open to your input and your wisdom and your advice, to the point that they will begin asking you questions, right? What do you think I should do? That's the question you want to hear in this process, right? Rather than telling them and schooling them on what you think. Okay, the next page of this is going to get into some of their strengths, which is always helpful to highlight strengths for your student. But then we look in more detail at their personality and how it influences problem solving and making decisions. Obviously, this is a huge decision-making thing. And on this, they can be, look right here, I'm going to show you, spontaneous, right, or cautious as a decision maker. And that little scale right there is a terrific place to begin thinking about, okay, now I'm getting why they're doing what they're doing when it comes to this selection process, this application process for schools and universities, because the person that is cautious is obviously going to approach the whole decision-making process very differently than the person who is spontaneous, okay? And we happen to have a son who's applying to schools right now, and he's very spontaneous. And he's also intuitive. This kid, he's just like, I got a feeling, I know I want these kinds of schools, but I got a feeling, well, why are you interested in that? Because I don't see that necessarily they have the major that you're really, well, I don't know. I got this sense, Dad, you know, and it takes a lot of patience, a lot of endurance, a lot of empathy to walk through the process with a student like that, right? At least if you're hardwired differently. Now, some parents, you're going to discover, I'm just like that. I got a good feeling about it too. I can't explain it, but I like its location. I think it's cool that, but you know, and you're just going to have more of that kind of sense rather than kind of the facts that a different personality is. So you get the idea. This is just going to help you kind of articulate it, which is incredibly valuable in the process of getting through this. Now, I want to highlight a couple more things and then we're going to wrap this up. And the next one is called your story, the next page. The premise here is that your student is interesting to other people, but they may not know how to make themselves interesting to other people. And this can be really important if there's an interview process. It's certainly important in selecting a roommate. It's incredibly important in just cultivating friendships as well. And so this is designed to help your student create conversational hooks. Do you know what I mean by that? Have you ever been with somebody and you're trying to get to know them and where'd you grow up? Oh, I grew up in Boston. Oh, that's cool. I love Boston. I've never been there. Did you like Boston? Yeah, it was a good place to grow up, right? Okay, and then suddenly you're like Barbara Walters. You got to do all the talking to interview to pull this person out, and they're not giving any conversational hooks. That's very different than saying, oh yeah, so you grew up in Boston. That's cool. Did you like growing up in Boston? And the student says, yeah. And in fact, one of my favorite things is going to Red Sox games because my uncle, he blah, 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 right? Oh, well, now we have a conversation. Now I got a hook to hang some stuff on. And that's just one little example. There's several things here that you can help your student kind of begin to develop as conversational hooks. Now, I want to underscore this. It's really important that you not treat this as you're the instructor to do this for them. Let this do the work for you, and you're just processing it with them. But here's the 4 conversational hooks that are so helpful for students to develop. Competencies, what they're good at. They might be an incredible skateboarder or a musician or whatever it is, debate club. Experiences, maybe they went to Jamaica for the last vacation. Maybe they are an Eagle Scout, whatever it is, experiences. Vulnerability, that's the toughest one, right? When you reveal something, I gotta tell you, in this whole process of registration, I'm like a nervous wreck. Whoa, that's vulnerable, right? But when you do that in a conversation, guess what? The other person will join you and match that level of vulnerability 9 times out of 10. And then passions, what are they passionate about? I'm so passionate about, the Celtics, staying on the Boston lane there, or I'm so passionate about race car driving, or knitting, or gardening, or my Harley, or whatever it is, right? What are their paths? So these are things that are really helpful in constructing the narrative that they begin to share with other people. And equally as important, if not more important, to help your student in this process to succeed, especially once they get into a college and they're cultivating new friendships and they're away from home, is this right here, their curiosity quotient. Why? Because that's what drives that curiosity. And the longer I do research on this whole topic, the more convinced I am it may be the single most important thing to have a great two-way conversation. If you have kind of a humble curiosity about, hey, why would you say that? Or, I'm dying to know, were you the same as me when XYZ happened? It's those kinds of ways that we pull information because we genuinely want to know, not as a technique, but because it comes from our heart. Boy, that's when you really begin to build bonds with other people. So that's your story. Now, I'm not going to go through the rest of these pages. You get the idea. Timetable. How are they hardwired for time? You ever thought about that? We're going to be late. Well, there might be a reason that you have to say that a lot to certain students, right? This will kind of explain that. We get into communication, the lifeblood of a relationship. We get into conflict, resolving conflict, friendships and their friendship factor and what goes into that. Their love life, if you want to do that. They'll be very slow to share that. And then their outlook. And I want to just end with this because it's the outlook. This is where the student begins to reveal some of their goals and even their emerging life purpose that they can't articulate yet. This will help them on that path. Because trust me, your student has a dream. They may not have shared it with you, some do, but they probably haven't shared the real dream that is beating in their chest, that whenever they think about it, their heart races a little bit. They're so excited to realize that dream. Every young person that is on this trajectory of going to college does. And so this will help you begin to pull that out and talk about it. All right, so that's a little tool. Take it if it's helpful. If not, disregard doing yada if you think, that'll never work with my student. This is not a pressure tactic to get you to do that. It's just one thought on how you might be able to walk alongside your student in this critically important decision process and the whole 4 years ahead of them in college, depending on where they're at. And by the way, our student, his name is Jackson, and he went to a Christian college his freshman year and decided this is not the place for me. And there was a lot of reasons for that. And so now we're going through this process again. And man, it's such a joy to do this with him because guess what? We've worked really hard at putting ourselves in his shoes, understanding him, making sure that he feels known in this process. And that means some flexibility, and that means some kind of compromise in some ways. And we're not at a place where we're getting yeses and nos to make a decision, but I'm fully confident because of this ground that we've kind of plowed in the process, that when it comes down to it, Jack is going to go, hey, what do you guys think? I want to make this decision together. He may not say it in those words, but that will be the result. And it's all because of that single word, empathy. I hope this has been helpful, and I wish you all the best.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Parrott. So blessed to have him share his story, share about empathy. Man, we could all use more empathy and understanding, and definitely through the college search process, for sure. So taking the time to do that, taking the time to listen to your students to listen to your parents. Take a deep breath and just trust that God is going to be with you, and he's going to show you in one way or another. He's faithful to do that. So if you see on your screen right now a way to take the YADA assessment, go to this link. It's www.yada.com/NACAP. And that will get you to the YADA assessment. There's about a $20 cost for that assessment, but so much information and just great things to discuss, and just the opportunity to know yourself, students, it's just wonderful. If you do have any questions about this virtual session or anything that we can help you with about the college search process, feel free to email us at christiancollegefairs@natcap.org. You'll see that on your screen as well. And just a quick reminder, the virtual Christian College Fair is open through the end of November. You can interact live with college reps in their booth, specifically on Thursday, November 17th from 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern, but you can still go visit the booths anytime, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and check out some amazing colleges that change lives. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you for being here, and have a wonderful rest of your day.